Hey everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to the channel. I have a really fun tag for you today. I saw Chaz over at Bookish Chaz do this and I just thought the questions were a lot of fun and gave me the opportunity to talk about some books that I don't talk about all the time. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. The first question is, show a book that challenged you as a reader. And the first thing that came to mind is a book that I read way too early in my reading journey. When I started to get back into reading in 2019, I kind of went through the greatest hits. I was looking up like top 100 books everybody should read, 10 best books of all time, stuff like that. And this is a book that came up on a lot of those lists, and that would be War and Peace. I was not ready for War and Peace. It's not even that it's necessarily a hard read. It is obviously very, very long. That was part of why I wanted to read it. It's such a famous book. And as somebody who was just getting into reading, I was like, oh, this will be a nice feather in my cap to say I've read one of the longest books that you can possibly read. And unfortunately for me, I just wasn't ready for it. There's so much covered. There's so much context that I was missing. And I just wasn't at my reading ability to kind of stitch everything together in the way that I would have liked to. I still had a good time with it. By no means did I dislike War and Peace. It was just more of I wasn't ready for it. And I think if I read it today, I would enjoy it significantly more than I did then. And, maybe that's a book that would be ripe for rereading at some point. The second question is, show a book by an author you love. And I have not only an author I love, but my favorite fantasy series of all time. I was lucky enough to get my edition of The Dragonsteel Eye of the World. And this book is just absolutely amazing to see in person. It's just beautiful. I love this author. I love this series. It's just so special to me in so many different ways. Even the parts of this series that people, necessarily aren't their favorite, I still really like. And I'm so lucky to have this edition. And I don't know, I want to say I want to go through and kind of reread from it, but it's just so nice. I almost just want to leave it on the shelf and look at it. Nice and pretty. I'm sure some of us can all relate to how that is with some of these leather bounds that come out. Question number 3 is, show a book that you would recommend to everybody. I have probably a very basic answer for this at this point. I think people are going to be sick of this book, getting sick recommended this book, and I think it's really going to be something that's all over the place right now because it's about to get a movie release, and that is Project Hail Mary. I can already hear the boos from people who think this book is overrated and everything. But it is such an easy recommendation for so many people. It just clicks so many boxes. It just, it has heart. It's witty. It's fun. It has serious moments, but it also has that lighthearted nature to it. Obviously, I think personally having a movie adaptation coming out is a better selling point because it can maybe get somebody into the book. They see the movie, they want to read the book, or vice versa. You want to read the book before you see the movie. I think it's such an easy recommendation. It is still to this day one of my favorite audiobook experiences. If you know, you know, and if you don't, you should find out because the audiobook is an extra special experience with this one. And yeah, I have recommended this to so many people and it has worked for pretty much all of them. I don't know if I've recommended this to anybody who they ended up really hating it. Obviously, recommending a book to anybody is pretty impossible, but this is one that I think just lands for so many people. The next question, so this is question number 4, is show a book that made you cry. So this is another book I love. This is my 3rd favorite book of all time. I read this, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago at this point. That would be A Man Called Ove. Super heart-touching, heart-wrenching, just so many things about this book. I don't want to say too much because spoilers, but it'll put you through the emotional ringer. I never thought I would connect with a character as much as I did in this book. If you have not seen Murphy Napier's review of this book, that is a video that made me cry. I was already emotional from reading the book, and then watching her and her review of it was just a disaster. It was a mess of emotions, but it's a great video. If you haven't seen it, or if you've not read this book, you absolutely should, and then you should watch that video. It's just an awesome experience. A Man Called Ove. It also has a movie, A Man Called Otto. It's not nearly as good as the book, but it does exist. The next question is to show a book that would make a great buddy read. And this is cheating a little bit because it's obviously a series and not an individual book. And I am actually currently in a buddy read for this series, but I'll go ahead and show the current read that we're doing. And that is Traitor's Knot by Jenny Wirtz. This is book 7 of the Wars of Light and Shadow. We are in, and there's a bunch of us, big discussion going on where we're going through each book and then, having a spoiler-filled discussion. The most recent one for Peril's Gate, that was book 6, was hosted on my channel. So if you want to go look at what we had to say about the series spoiler-free, the first, 20-ish minutes maybe are spoiler-free. That's how great this series is to talk about, that even though we had just finished the 6th book, we could spend that much time talking about it in a non-spoiler way. This book is truly epic. It is one of those big epics. Like you think Malazan, Wars of Light and Shadow is right there with it. You think something like a Sun Eater, big epic. I know it's a different genre, but these wide scoping stories. And it's also a very personal story. I think there's a lot of really personal things that you get from the characters, and there's just so much to talk about. There's probably so much I'm missing I know there's so much that I miss reading it by myself, and then when we talk about it, just things come to light, or you get a different perspective on things that the characters are doing or saying, or their reactions to things. And it has been a great experience. So I would highly recommend, if you are interested in that series, to read it. And there are a couple groups that are doing chats as they go through it, and I would highly recommend watching them all. Obviously, I think you should watch ours because they're fantastic, and yeah, it's a great time. Like I said, there's just so much to discuss in all of those books. Even when we talk for, I think that video is almost 2 hours long or something like that. Maybe not, but there's just that much to discuss in the series. And I also think it would be a great series on a reread. Next up is a book that has a really good plot twist, and I don't even know if this series or this book, it is part of a series, has the best plot twist of any of them, but it was the first book that came to mind when I heard that question, and that is The Da Vinci Code by Robert Langdon. Or no, this is the Robert Langdon series by Dan Brown. I read this all the way back in like 8th grade. I think I was in middle school still reading this, and I think I read Angels and Demons and then The Da Vinci Code, and I just remember having such a good time with this book and being so blown away by these random threads that are being pulled together, and you don't know what's happening and where stuff's coming from, and just all of the things that go into a good thriller. I know, once again, there's movies for this and everything, but man, these books, I just remember having such a good time with them. And I have read more recently the newer entries in the Robert Langdon series. I forget what they're called off the top of my head, the original, and then I still need to read the secret. It's like the Secret History or the Secret of History or something like that. It's kind of got a little bit of a silly title, but the plot twist, the intrigue, the just wanting to keep reading, the page turners, that was definitely the first thing I thought of when I saw that question. Next up is show a book that you struggled to finish, and I'm just going to go ahead and apologize to all of my Malazan Book of the Fallen fans, but House of Chains was one of the hardest reading experiences I had when it came to finishing a book. I did not want to finish this book. The only reason I finished House of Chains is because I don't DNF books. I for whatever reason, I have to see them through. And it's crazy because the first book, so each Malazan book is split into 4 books. That first book I really enjoyed. I thought we were in home run territory. It was finally, everything was clicking, and then the rest of the book happened, and I just didn't like it. And that doesn't mean it was bad. I will never say that these are bad books, because they're not. I think objectively, I can appreciate what is going on in them, and it's just a disconnect thing with me and these books. And it's unfortunate because I would love to love the series. I will say this was a much worse experience than any of the other ones I have read. I have read 1 book past this at this point, and I had a better experience with that. Still not great, but it's just, it's a book that I struggled. This ruined weeks of reading for me when I read it. And it's unfortunate, but that happens sometimes. And maybe if I just wasn't so stubborn and would just put a book down that when it happened, but that's just not something I can do. So I definitely really struggled with that. The penultimate question is, no, not the penultimate question. I can't count. The next question is, show a book you think is underrated. And I think this is probably, I don't know, I have a couple underrated books, but this is probably one of the most underrated ones. And it's actually a book I have never seen anybody else talk about here on BookTube, and that is The Never-Ending End of the World. I read this the first year I had a BookTube channel, so I think that would have been 2023, I guess. Yeah, 2023 I read this, and I had such a good time with it. I think this is ranked in my top 50, just to give you an idea. It is, once again, a little bit of a thriller, but also leans into some sci-fi elements. Just to give you like the quick idea is, there is a dystopian story where things are stuck in loops. And so, for example, you might, if you looked out your window, you might see somebody walk to the end of the sidewalk, disappear, and do it again, and just over and over and over and over and over again. For example, if you were to eat some food that was stuck in a loop, you would eat it, and then it would come out of your body. Not violently or anything, but it would basically just transport back to how it was before you ate it, and you would then be hungry again. Things like that. There's a lot of really fun things that are played with, and it's just super underrated. Like I said, I don't think I've seen anybody else on BookTube, at least this corner of BookTube, talk about it, and so I definitely want to highlight that one when I can. Now we're at the penultimate question. The question is, show a book that you cannot wait to read. And my answer for this is going to be The Caretaker by Marcus Kilwer. If you remember last year, if you've been around on the channel, I read We Used to Live Here by him and just had such a great reading experience with that. It's a reading experience that I think of so fondly. It was, I think, my third favorite book of last year, but it's a reading experience that just was so good. It was just, I can still remember walking in the hallway out of this room, and this is a psychological horror thriller kind of mystery book. And I'm reading it, and I remember like catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror and jumping because I was so spooked from reading this. And to have an experience like that was absolutely fantastic. It seems like The Caretaker is going to be in a little bit of a similar-ish vein, and so I'm just so excited to read that when it comes out. I believe it's in April, and I'm just so ready for it. I think it's going to be a fantastic time. And then finally, the last question is, show a book you would love to see adapted into a TV show or movie. And I'll be honest, I'm not really the biggest adaptation person when it comes to novels. I just don't care. I think there are such a limited number of adaptations that have been better than the books that it's not worth it, and most of the time they're worse. But I do understand, sharing them to a wider audience, stuff like that. And one thing I would love to see on the big screen, because I think it has both small intimate moments, but these big epic scale things that are going on. And I think this would probably have to be animated, but it would be Sun Eater by Christopher Rocchio. The one-of-one covers that I have, signed by him. Just had to show that off one more time. But I think this series, I don't know, I think of animation, just because of the scope of some of the stuff that goes on here, would be absolutely fantastic. I think there are some things that go on throughout the story that would be able to be conveyed in that medium better than a true live action. But I guess if you can do Dune live action, you could do Sun Eater live action. But that is probably my choice right now. Maybe a great Wheel of Time. The real answer is a great Wheel of Time adaptation. Maybe one day that can happen. It sucks that season 3 is what they ended on, because season 3 started to get really good, and then the show was canceled, which is very unfortunate for the trajectory of the show. But that has been this list of, or this has been this tag. I always have a lot of fun doing these. Let me know what your answers to any of this down below in the comments are, but that's going to be all for me. And remember to read what you want when you want.